The rain fell sideways that afternoon, the kind of storm that made the city seem smaller. Umbrellas flipping inside out, people running for doorways, expensive coats drenched in 5 seconds flat. Outside a downtown bistro, a young girl sat on the curb, knees pulled to her chest, soggy paper napkins scattered around her. She was maybe 12, chocolate-brown skin glistening with rain, braids plastered to her forehead. In front of her lay a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Before you scroll, picture this. A millionaire steps out of his luxury restaurant and spots a little black girl eating a soggy sandwich alone in the pouring rain. Seconds later, he realizes who she really is, and his world stops cold. Hit subscribe right now so you never miss stories that remind us money can't buy what the heart owes. Tap the bell to join a community that believes in empathy over ego and in kindness that crosses every boundary. And tell us in the comments which country you're watching from, because compassion has no borders, and it's incredible to see how far hope can travel. Inside, behind the window's distortion of raindrops, a man in a tailored navy suit noticed her. Charles Donovan, 42, one of the city's most well-known investors, owner of 3 skyscrapers, 2 penthouses, and 1 spotless reputation. He was mid-meeting with lawyers when his attention drifted from contracts to the blur of a small figure outside. "Why is there a kid sitting on the curb in this weather?" he asked abruptly. His assistant glanced up, unimpressed. "Sir, this district attracts all kinds, probably waiting for someone." But Charles couldn't look away. Something about her expression, a mix of stubborn will and quiet hunger, hooked his mind like a refrain he couldn't shake. The waitress refilled his coffee. He tapped the table, thinking. He didn't like unsolved things. Deals, puzzles, or stray possibilities outside his window. "Excuse me," he said finally, standing up. His lawyers looked startled. "Mr. Donovan, you're 3 o'clock. Tell them to wait," he said. "I need 5 minutes." The bell above the door chimed as he stepped out, cold water instantly soaking his shoes. The girl didn't look up as he approached. She was too busy protecting her sandwich from the rain, cupping it like a fragile secret. "Hey," he said gently, "shouldn't you be indoors somewhere?" She startled, eyes widening. For a second he could see both defiance and fear battle behind them. I'm fine," she said quickly. "You're shaking," he noted. "It's just water. Don't worry about me." Her voice was clear, proud, and oddly familiar, pricking something vague in his memory. "Do you live nearby?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "Sometimes." He crouched to meet her eye level, rain sliding off his slicked hair. "What's your name, kid?" She swallowed. "Lena." "Okay, Lena, do you need help with something?" No. She interrupted too fast, pressing the sandwich into its wrapper, as if afraid he might take even that from her. Her glance flicked toward the tables inside the bistro. "You work there?" He almost smiled. "No, I own it." Something like recognition flickered through her eyes, then vanished behind guarded calm. "Guess some people own everything," she said quietly. He ignored the sting of her tone, more out of surprise than offense. "Look, I can get you a meal inside. Something warm." She shook her head. "I'm not allowed." "By who?" She turned to face him fully then, and the look in her eyes, hurt mixed with distance, made the world tilt sideways. "By my father," she murmured. "He said not to come here anymore." "Your father?" She nodded, whispering through the rain. "Charles Donovan." The sound of his name in her mouth froze him. Water pooled at his knees, heart thudding louder than the thunder overhead. Charles blinked hard, convinced the rain or the noise had distorted what he'd just heard. "What did you say?" The girl stared down, picking at bread between her fingers. "That's what my mom always told me," she said softly. "Charles Donovan, my real dad. She said you were too busy being rich to remember us." The street noise vanished behind the words. His breath came unevenly. "Your mother's name?" "Angela Lewis," she said. "From East Ridge." A name surfaced from a corner of memory he hadn't visited in more than a decade. Angela, the art school student with wild laughter. He'd dated for one brief spring before their lives spun in opposite directions. They'd lost touch after he'd left for grad school and his first investment job across the state. He'd known she'd moved to East Ridge. He hadn't known anything else. Now a small soaked child who shared Angela's wide-set eyes was looking up at him. He rubbed the rain from his brow, voice shaking. "Your mother, Angela, she passed away." "She died last year," Lena said matter-of-factly, though her chin trembled once before she swallowed it down. "Before she went, she said she forgave you. Said you'd make it right if I ever found you." Charles lowered himself fully onto the wet sidewalk, ignoring the weight of his designer suit. "Lena, I'd never known," he whispered. His mind flipped through timelines, recent birthdays, and an instant calculation that made his chest ache. 12. The timing worked. Each year of business success suddenly shrank beside that single number. Lena hugged her knees, mistrust closing her off. "It's okay. I don't need a dad. I just needed somewhere to sit without being yelled at." An SUV splashed by, hissing water onto their shoes. Charles forced his voice steady. "Where do you live now?" "With the Marshalls," Lena said. "They adopted me after the funeral. They're nice, but sometimes they forget I don't like steak sauce on everything." Her attempt at humor didn't hide the tremor behind it. He studied her. The way her raincoat sleeves were too short. The way she tried to act older than she felt. Something inside him cracked wide open. "Does your family know you're here?" "Probably not," she admitted. "I come by after school to feel close to her. She used to work around here cleaning offices. Said this place used to smell like good food and bad decisions." Charles almost laughed, hearing Angela's exact phrasing. Then guilt drowned the memory. He'd carved a career on decisiveness, and yet somehow avoided the one decision that mattered. "Come inside," he said finally. She hesitated. "I'll get in trouble. I own the trouble." He stood, offering his hand. "Please." For a long moment she just stared at that hand. The rain became gentler, pattering rhythmically around them. Finally she slipped her small palm into his. He felt the cold through her skin, cold he realized had very little to do with weather. The hostess's eyes widened when they entered. Their reflections shimmered across the black marble floor, soaked footprints trailing behind. Charles guided her to a corner booth, waved off curious staff and ordered soup and cocoa. Lena kept glancing at the glass walls, wary like a stray expecting to be chased out. While they waited, he started quietly. "I don't know how to start this. If Angela said I'm your father, then the only thing I can tell you is that I didn't know. Not that it changes much." She stirred the cocoa slowly. "She didn't talk bad about you. She said she made her choices and you made yours." He swallowed hard. "They weren't good choices." The waitress placed their soup down, giving him a look that said half pity, half confusion. Lena spooned a bite, then smiled faintly. "This is amazing." Charles watched her eat, a mix of wonder and grief twisting inside him. "What school do you go to?" "Hope Henderson Academy, scholarship kids mostly," she replied. "We get free lunches if we finish homework early." He frowned. That academy sat across town from one of his newest real estate ventures. "And this is how you spend lunch? To sit in the rain eating sandwiches?" She shrugged thin shoulders. "It's quieter out there than cafeteria noise." "You can think better when it rains." The innocence in that reasoning hit him harder than any business failure ever had. When she finally finished, she glanced up at his untouched cup of coffee. "You keep staring like I'm about to vanish." He forced a small smile. "I'm just trying to figure out how to make up 13 years in one conversation." Her eyes, so much like Angela's, softened. "You can't, but maybe you could start by walking me home." He nodded instantly. "Of course." When they stepped outside, the rain had stopped, but puddles stayed like mirrors along the street. He saw her reflection beside his, tall, polished businessman and small girl wrapped in too big raincoat, and no reflection had ever unsettled him more. Charles walked her through narrowing streets where neon signs hissed in the damp. Lena skipped puddles, trying to hide her curiosity behind indifferent chatter. "You don't look like the pictures I imagined," she said frankly. He glanced down, caught between pain and pride. "What did you imagine?" She shrugged. "Some guy in a castle made of money. Mom said you lived up high where you couldn't hear thunder." He laughed softly, a rough sound. "I guess I did." They reached a neighborhood of aging row houses. Laundry lines flapped between brick walls like prayer flags. She led him toward a small blue home with peeling paint. Through the window came the murmur of a TV and the smell of frying onions. When Lena knocked, a woman opened the door, early 40s, kind eyes, apron dusted with flour. "Lena? Lord, I was worried," she exclaimed. Then, catching sight of Charles's expensive suit and damp shoes, her expression sharpened. "And you are?" Charles faltered, unused to explaining himself anywhere but boardrooms. "I'm Charles Donovan." Recognition flashed across her face. "The developer?" "Yes, ma'am. But more importantly," he looked at Lena, who refused to meet his gaze. "More importantly, I think I'm her father." The woman blinked slowly, hand covering her mouth before she whispered, Dear heavens. She guided them both inside. I'm Mrs. Marshall. My husband works nights. We took Lena in after her mama passed. We never suspected. She kept your name quiet. That's my fault, he said quietly. Mrs. Marshall nodded, studying him against the warm clutter of the kitchen, the framed school certificates on the fridge, the second-hand furniture polished with love. Finally she said, She's got a good heart. Smart too. You plan to be in her life now? Yes, Charles said without hesitation. If she'll let me. Lena pulled her backpack tighter. I don't need anything, she mumbled. You think this is about need? Charles said softly. It's about what was stolen from both of us. Time. The woman exchanged a look with the girl. You two talk. I'll leave dinner warming. She disappeared down the hall. Charles turned to Lena. I can't ask you to forgive me yet, but I can show you what kind of father I want to be. She hesitated. Mom said money doesn't fix everything. She was right, he replied. But listening might. That night they talked until rain started again, gentler now. He learned her favorite subject, science, her least math. She learned that the fancy restaurant he'd taken her to belonged to a charity partnership he'd found dull until she mentioned it. When he finally stood to leave, she surprised him by asking, Can I visit your office someday? He smiled. You can visit anywhere you want. Back in his penthouse, the skyline glittered indifferent to human revelations. He stared at old photographs, pulled from boxes untouched in years. Angela's smile looked up at him from crisp creases. He sat awake till dawn, writing letters. To lawyers, to schools, to anyone who could help him protect the girl he'd just met. But life never unfolds neatly. 2 weeks later, he arrived for a scheduled parent-teacher day at Hope Henderson Academy. The parking lot buzzed with kids and chatter. Across the yard, he saw Lena seated alone under a playground canopy, rain dripping again from its edge. She picked at lunch from a cafeteria tray, eyes shuttered. When he approached, she looked up but didn't smile. What happened? He asked, crouching beside her. She hesitated, anger flickering behind embarrassment. Some kids found out. Found out what? That I'm yours, she said in a whisper. They said I only got new shoes because you pity me. Called me a charity project. Her mouth tightened. I told them it wasn't like that, but they laughed. Something primal quaked in his chest, the fury of seeing his own privilege mirrored as someone else's pain. Come with me, he said, voice shaking. She refused. If I leave now, they win. Mom always said stand tall even when it rains. He exhaled, recognizing the same courage that once lived in her mother. He sat beside her instead, knees soaking in puddles. Then I'll wait with you, he said. We'll stand tall together. A teacher watching through the window whispered later how the richest man in the county sat on wet ground for 40 minutes beside a silent 12-year-old, matching her stubborn dignity moment for moment. After school, he drove her home in silence. At a stoplight, she finally asked, Why did you give me up? He gripped the wheel tighter. Cowardice, he admitted. I was afraid of losing everything before realizing I'd already lost what mattered. Rain tapped lightly on the windshield while she tried to process that honesty. Then quietly she said, You can come to family night Friday. The Marshalls always make too much food. He smiled tightly. I'd like that. That night, alone again, what she'd said at school echoed louder than thunder. They called me a charity project. He stared at his reflection in the penthouse glass, tailored, sterile, hollow. He realized money couldn't erase the scent of rain, the sound of judgment, or how small a girl looked when facing cruelty he'd never endured. For the first time in his perfected existence, Charles Donovan wept. He arrived that Friday balancing a paper bag of pastries as an awkward peace offering. The modest Marshall house smelled of cornbread and optimism. Laughter echoed from the kitchen, where Mrs. Marshall and 2 neighbors prepared dishes for the community dinner they held every month. Lena met him at the doorway, feet bare, braids newly tied with gold ribbons. Her eyes still carried a trace of shyness, but the cold edge from earlier that week had dulled. So you can't just leave money on the counter and pretend you cooked, she teased softly. He grinned. Then I'll earn my share. Point me toward the hardest job. They put him to work washing greens. For a man accustomed to marble countertops and assistants who refilled his coffee before it reached half empty, the small kitchen became its own education. He rinsed mud from roots while listening to stories about local kids raising money for textbooks, about neighbors sharing casseroles when illness hit. The word community stopped sounding abstract. It smelled like garlic, and sounded like overlapping laughter. At dinner, the crowded table bowed under plates of food. The marshals blessed the meal, and Charles fumbled his way through clasping hands. He caught Lena watching him, her lips twitching in amusement as he muttered the grace a beat late. They ate until everyone was stuffed to quiet satisfaction. When the evening slowed, Lena pulled him into the living room where photos cluttered a shelf. Birthdays, school awards. A faded snapshot of Angela holding baby Lena. She picked it up tenderly. She always said you weren't a bad person, just living too far away to see clearly. He nodded, words caught behind memory. She said that? Every time I asked about you. Lena turned, eyes steady. But I needed you and you weren't there. He forced himself to meet her gaze. No excuse fixes that. But I'm here now if you still want me to be. She studied him with an intensity far older than her years before, finally saying, "Then quit acting like a visitor." That sentence landed heavier than any business contract he'd ever signed. The following months reshaped routines. Charles carved hours out of his calendar to attend every school event, community meeting, and dentist appointment. Small worlds previously invisible from 37 floors up. He began channeling donations quietly into scholarships at underserved schools, starting with Hope Henderson Academy, but leaving his name off the bulletins. During one visit to the Marshalls, he overheard Lena in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Marshall load groceries. "He's learning," she whispered, laughing. "Doesn't look so scared of normal people anymore." Normal. The word warmed him more than any headline about quarterly profits. Spring arrived with pastel skies. One afternoon, while Lena's soccer practice wrapped up, Charles waited beside the field reading his phone until he noticed her crouched at the edge of bleachers, sharing half her orange with a smaller boy whose shoes were duct-taped together. She smiled in that same tender way Angela once had. Defiant kindness that didn't check the price tag before giving. He realized she didn't learn that from wealth or even from her adoptive home. It was something innate, something that refused to calcify even after losing almost everything. When practice ended, she ran toward him, waving. "Dad!" she called, and the word startled them both. She froze mid-stride, blushing. "Sorry, that just—" He swallowed the thickness in his throat. "Don't be sorry," he said quietly. The next week he called a meeting at his foundation's executive board. The conference room overlooked the same street where he'd found Lena eating in the rain months earlier. "We're changing priorities," he announced. "Half of our annual budget goes toward outreach for foster and adoptive programs in neglected communities. Effective immediately." The CFO cleared his throat. "That's unprecedented, sir. Investors may see this as emotional." Charles smiled faintly. "Good. Emotions built skyscrapers long before spreadsheets did." By summer, the foundation launched the Angela Lewis Scholarship Fund in honor of the woman whose forgiveness had reshaped him. The first recipient was Lena herself, covering any school she wished to attend. At the ceremony, she stood next to him nervously before the microphones. Her voice wavered at first, then steadied. "People think love means being comfortable," she said, "but sometimes it's the opposite. Love makes you walk out into storms until you find each other again." The audience rose, a wave of applause that blurred into his heartbeat. He remembered that first afternoon's thunder, her tiny hands holding a soggy sandwich, the shame of his own ignorance dissolving into gratitude. After the speeches, as cameras flashed, she leaned close enough for only him to hear. "Mom would have liked this view." He smiled through damp eyes. She made it possible. When the crowd cleared, they walked outside into light drizzle. She looked up at the clouds and laughed. "Guess the rain's ours now." He opened an umbrella above them. "Not a storm this time," he said. "Just a reminder of where we started." Around them the city carried on, hurried, loud, oblivious. For Charles Donovan, every droplet sliding down that umbrella felt like atonement measured in water and time. Autumn rolled in with a warmth that didn't belong to the temperature. The leaves around the Marshall's block turned the exact shade of burnt copper that Angela once used to paint sunsets, in an old sketch he still kept framed near his desk. For once, business didn't rule his schedule. His assistant now blocked entire days with simple notes reading family time. On those afternoons, Charles drove the same second-hand sedan that Lena had chosen, instead of the sleek black town car sent by his office. She said it made her dad look like a normal human. He liked how the word dad rolled off her voice without effort, like it had always been there waiting. One crisp Saturday, they spent the morning volunteering at a foster care center funded by the new foundation program. Lena helped younger kids mix paint for art therapy, while he replaced ceiling tiles alongside local contractors. The director, a wiry woman with silver hair, stopped him mid-work. "Your daughter's got it in her," she said. "Everything you can't teach, heart before pride." He smiled. "She's been the teacher all along." That night, after dropping Lena at the Marshalls, he sat in his car a long time watching light flicker through their front window, family framed in gold. He no longer envied the corporate skyline glittering farther off. For decades he had collected things measured in square footage and zeros. Now fulfillment fit into a modest house that smelled of cinnamon rolls. Weeks later, Hope Henderson Academy invited him to give a speech at a new wing opening, built using the foundation funds. He declined the stage at first, but Lena insisted. "People need to know change isn't magic, it's choice," she told him. On the day of the ceremony, she introduced him herself. "This program started because someone decided to listen after too many years of silence," she said into the microphone. "He's never liked standing in front of crowds, but he's here anyway, just like he promised me that rainy day." Applause filled the gym as he walked to the podium. He rested one palm on the cool wood and took a slow breath. "I used to believe success was measured by how high you could build walls around yourself," he said. "Then one afternoon I stepped outside and met a girl eating in the rain. She didn't ask for money, just kindness. That's when I learned real wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you finally realize you owe." When word of the speech spread, social media called him the reformed tycoon. Journalists hunted for the exact redemption formula, but there wasn't one. It was just a father trying to catch up with a daughter who taught him to walk through storms instead of around them. A year later, he found Lena standing outside that same bistro where it had begun, now renovated under the Foundation's youth training project. She looked up as drizzle began to fall and grinned. "Full circle," she said. He opened a new umbrella, smaller than the one before, so they'd fit underneath it together. "Full circle," he agreed. The rain tapped softly, not punishment anymore, just rhythm. Behind the window, customers talked, lights glowed, and for once Charles Donovan, the man who thought he had everything, knew he finally did.